Parshas Pinchas, Tofshin Ayin Tes. And before we begin tonight's shir on the Parsha, just want to mention that this coming week, Bikuch Cholim of Lakewood will be having their campaign called 365 for 365. And anybody who knows anything about our hosts here, Bikuch Cholim of Lakewood, knows what a marvelous, unbelievable organization it is. And they really do work 365 days a year, constantly being worried about those in the hospitals, those that are homebound, those that need transportation. And there's really a tremendous operation going on here. But they need your help to keep the operation going. And if you take a look at the banner back here, 365 to 365, they're looking to raise $365,000 during the campaign. And of course, we don't need one person to give the whole thing, although you're always welcome. But if everybody could possibly contribute, and I will send out a link with the shir on my WhatsApp version of the shir tonight. Thank you very much. And the Parsha, this Parshas Pinchas, is really one that covers many subjects and themes. And we've discussed a whole bunch of them over the years. And first, of course, the reward that Pinchas received, the reward of Shalom, the revenge on the Midyanim, the counting of Bnei Yisrael, the appointment of Yeshua, who would become the successor to Moshe Rabbeinu, and finally, the latter half of the Parsha that discusses the Seder of the Karbonos. And many of you are familiar with this part of the Parsha because we read this part of the Parsha every Rosh Chodesh. We read it at the Maftir of the Yom Tovim and the Kriya on Sukkot. And many of the Karbonos from the second half of the Parsha are very familiar to everybody, just from the very fact that we read them all the time. And the section of that part of the Parsha begins, Tzavas B'nei Yisrael. Command the B'nei Yisrael, V'yamarto Alehem, you should say to them, Es Karboni Lachni L'Ishai, Reach Nichaychi Tishmeru Li B'moyadoi, to bring these Karbonos in their proper time. And the Orach Chaim HaKadosh brought down here in the Nesivos Shalom, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh asks a question. Why is it that the Torah first writes about these Karbonos only after the Torah speaks about the appointment of Yeshua as the eventual successor to Moshe Rabbeinu? Why is it we have the entire beginning of the Parsha, the Torah tells us about Yeshua, that Yeshua should be appointed to succeed Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu would not be going into Eretz Yisrael, when these Karbonos were actually already brought for the past 40 years in the Midbar. We know that since the Hakamas HaMishkan, since the Mishkan was put up many years before this, these Karbonos were already being brought. Why is it that now, Dafka, after the appointment of Yeshua, is when we chose to mention these Karbonos? A really tremendous question. So too, why the juxtaposition of these Parshias, the Parsha of Yeshua to that of the Karbonos? Why are they near each other? Why are they one Parsha right after the other? What is the connection? And even though we know that there really is no chronological order of events in the Torah, but the Nesivos Shalom tells us that even though there is no actual order of events, that things are not necessarily in a chronological order, which means that they are in time, based on time, they are one after the other. That doesn't have to be. Yet, there is still a reason why the Torah put things in the Seder that they are. They may not be in order of time, but there's definitely a reason why one thing is after or before the other. And here in our parsha, we see specifically the Torah wrote about Yehoshua succeeding Moshe Rabbeinu, and then we went ahead and wrote about these karbanos. And the Nesivos Shalom tells us that the Noam Elimelech in Parshas Noach tells us that each generation, something that we need to know, each generation has its own unique mitzvah, and it has its own unique thing that they have to be misakein during their lifetime. And you see from here that the Nesivos Shalom is also telling us from the Noam Elimelech that many times you'll hear people say, oh, in that generation, they were so makbid on this, and they were so great in this midah, they were so great in doing this and this. While it may be true that they were great in doing a certain thing, but it may not be our tafkid. It may not be our obligation. Every single generation has their thing that they are supposed to be misaking during the lifetime of that generation. Something that requires dafka that generation's mesiras nefesh. And the Noam Elimelech happens to mention, he says, during his door, for whatever this means, during his generation, the nisoyon, and the thing that they had to do with mesiras nefesh was the mitzvah of tzitzis. During that generation. Why or how the Noam Elimelech knew, I don't know. But the Noam Elimelech tells us that that was the challenge, that was the test, that was the mesiras nefesh of that generation. And big tzaddikim know really what big tzaddikim are able to tell what the midah and the mitzvah of that generation are. And by Noach, the pasuk actually tells us that Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya b'doyroisav. And there are different drushes about that word b'doyroisav in his generation. But from here we can see that Noach was doing what his generation warranted that he should do at that time. Tamim haya b'doyroisav, for his generation, he knew what had to be done. And he was doing that thing. Just as a side point, a nice translation of that word. Noach was mekayim, the tafkid of his generation. And one way that we could know what indicates what the mitzvah of the generation is to see which mitzvah you have a special siyata d'shmaya for amongst Klal Yisrael. Sayin Torah, and in Avodah and Gemilas Chasadim, you see a certain siyata d'shmaya that that generation is able to do better than other generations before. You see that, so you have some indication of what really the tafkid of our generation is, and I'll leave that to everybody else to actually try to figure that out. But for our point right now, the door of Moshe Rabbeinu, we know, was called the Dor Deah. The generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, the generation that was Makabel the Torah, was an exceptional generation. And Chazal tell us that there never was a generation as great as that, and there never will be a generation like that. And it originated, where did the greatness of this generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, the generation in the Midbar, where did it originate from? It originated from the koyach of Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the Midas Hadas of Klal Yisrael. They were called the Dor Deah, and they got all that from Moshe Rabbeinu, and that is what made them so great. And for 40 years, they drew from Moshe Rabbeinu, and they learned the Torah straight from Moshe Rabbeinu. But the next generation now, the Dor of Yehoshua, the Dor that would be going into Eretz Yisrael, that generation, the Nesivos Shalom tells us, that generation was not going to be the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu. They were already going to be different. The Dor of Boi Haaretz, the Dor that was going to go into Eretz Yisrael, was meant to serve Hashem in a different way than the generation that was with Moshe Rabbeinu. And the way they were destined to serve Hashem was a Dor of Yegiah. By Moshe Rabbeinu sort of spoon-fed it and gave it over in such a special and unique and high way to Klal Yisrael. The Torah was given to them on a silver platter. But now comes the generation of Yehoshua. The next generation, it was going to be a little bit different. There wasn't going to be a Moshe Rabbeinu. They would have to start to earn the Torah and earn the mitzvahs from Yigia, from working. And the root of serving Hashem with working, the root of serving Hashem with avodah, we know, is the avodah of the karbanos. The karbanos represented so many things, represented avodah, and now represented tefillah, we know. But the generation of Yeshua was going to serve Hashem. How? With Yigia. And what is Yigia? What is work? Work begins with the karbanos. And the karbanos are, as we know, the shirish, the root of avodas Hashem. The karbanos that are brought every Rosh Chodesh, every Yontiv, that is the neshama, the root of the Yom Tovim. That's why the Torah tells us so much about those karbanos. And that is why, says in the Nesivos Shalom, the parsha of karbanos comes right after the parsha about the appointment of Yeshua. Hashem is telling us by the appointment of Yeshua that it's going to be different. You're not always going to have the Moshe Rabbeinu to give you over the Torah. Now you're going to have to start working. You're going to have to start having that Yigia. It's going to be work to attain the mitzvahs, to attain the Torah. And what is work? What is the ultimate Yigia? What is the ultimate work of serving Hashem? That is the karbanos. So the Torah tells us first that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to pass on. And Yeshua is going to take over. And just know, don't be down about it. Don't be depressed about it. Don't think it's over. You have a different work. Your generation has a work of Yigia, of serving Hashem through more work. It's not going to be served to you on a silver platter. You're going to have a different job, a different avodah. So one follows the other in the Torah. And the Torah uses a lashon of tzadas b'nei Yisrael, a commandment to know that this is the way it's going to be for all generations. A commandment to know that you have a commandment to do things different than the generation before you. Don't try to mimic. Don't try to copy. Every generation has to know their job. And Hashem has tremendous satisfaction from this. Kaviyachol. Hashem, we see, the Torah tells us, Reach michoichi, as karbani lachmi, liishai reach michoichi. Hashem likes the result of working. Hashem likes the result when a person actually has Yigia and a person has to work to attain the mitzvahs and the avodah. And when the Torah tells us, Tishmeru, the Torah is telling us as in the Aviv Shomares Hadavar. Tishmeru means that in waiting, hoping, anticipating. Hashem is waiting and hoping and anticipating that we'll understand that Hashem likes each person approaching HaKadosh Baruch Hu the way he or she is able to. Don't try to copy someone else from the generation before you. And just on the theme of the Bein HaMetzarim that we're coming up to now, 2 weeks till Tisha B'Av, that the Churban came, and now we have to hope and yearn for these karbanos. We have to yearn for this avodah. These karbanos are the ultimate avodah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is really our job during the Bein HaMetzarim. Chazal tell us that kol ha'oisek b'Torahs oila, anyone who's oisek in the Torah and learning about karban oila, it's as if you brought an oila. And kol ha'oisek b'Torahs chatas, anyone who's oisek in the learning about chatas, it's as if you brought a chatas. Notice, says in the Nesivos Shalom, it doesn't say kol ha'loimid. It doesn't say if you learn the parsha of the Torah. It says kol ha'oisek. It means that you should be working for it. You should be in it. You should want it. You should understand that we don't have the karbanos now. We don't have the ultimate way to have that yigia, to have that closeness to Hashem. But we need to remember that we need to do the job of our generation. We need to understand that what people before us did is not necessarily what we have to do. And that is the lesson for having the parsha of karbanos right after the parsha of appointing Yehoshua.